Here we have another PlayStation 4 that we are changing the HDMI port on. So it came in for bad HDMI port, and let's go ahead and change it. Okay, so the joints do not look factory. It looks like somebody tampered with the HDMI port. I mean, look at the joints here. That's definitely not a factory soldering. Let's look at the pins in the front. And that's not factory soldering as well. All the pins are shifted over to the front. I do not know if they are even soldered on or connected. They're not connected. The person who tried to solder the connector on did not even solder a single pin on there. And this pin is all the way inside. This pin is soldered. Okay, no wonder the HDMI port is not working. I do not know who worked on this HDMI port before, but definitely a terrible job. A terrible job. We may be able to just fry this up without applying any heat, because I do not see any connections except for maybe one pin. There may be a tiny bit of solder holding this in place. I'm just gonna wake it off. For the most part, all the pins are not soldered, but let me just double check. Not a single one. Let's apply some heat and remove this connector. Okay, the port is out. Now we can clean the pads. Just like that. We may have to do the same thing here. If solder is stuck in the hole, you want to apply some solder to it and then suck the whole thing at once. This is done, so we only have this side. Let's do the same here. Okay, so now let's try to wick it off, add some plugs, and we should be all good. Let's take a look at it right now. Very good. Okay, so let's put the new HDMI connector on. Alright, so we put the new HDMI port in. And what I want to do, I want to press it down and solder a few pins in the front. You do not want the pins to be away from the pads. You want the pins to be pressing on the pads. You need to physically press the connector down using a tweezer or whatever. And you just add some solder onto the front pins, 1 or 2. It doesn't have to be all. If the pins are not touching the pads, you're going to have a very difficult time soldering the pins. And you're going to end up removing the whole connector and changing it. It's okay if you see a little bit of mess now. I just want to put solder on some pins. Now what I want to do, since we soldered the front pins, I want to flip the board and solder the back pins, and then we'll come back to the front pins. If you go to the back to solder the back pins first and then you come to solder the front pins, then you may notice that the front pins pulled off the pads and it's gonna be impossible to solder the pins back on the pads. You can start by soldering the back pins first, that's no problem, and I've done that in a previous video, but now I'm choosing a different method so I can show you that you can do it both ways. I personally prefer to solder the front first, like add few blobs of solder on the front pins and then solder the back. Okay, now that we know the front pins are secured in place, we can solder the back pins without any worries. That's it. We still have to go over the pins and see if there's anything that moves. All pins should be solid. Let's see. I'm just a little worried about the last pin on the inside, right there.
بيرفكت يعني
كله تمام؟
احسن من هيك ما بقى في معلومين. البطاريه والهيدا
تمام.
وهيدي الهيدا
خال تمام تمام. Now we're gonna put the board back in the PlayStation. The customer sent the whole PlayStation in, so we're gonna put it back in and we're gonna test. Now the HDMI connector is perfectly soldered on, all the pins are solid. Let's say we put it back in the PlayStation and this board does not work. The PlayStation has been to another person before and we do not know what other things may be wrong with this, but according to the customer the problem was the HDMI port. If there's anything wrong with the board, we are not to blame because all we did was change the HDMI connector on this and the HDMI connector is soldered on properly. I'm gonna put this board back in the PlayStation and I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so the PlayStation is almost ready and we're gonna test it shortly. If it does work, great. If it doesn't work, we will still get paid for this because we did the job that we are required to do. No? Okay, it did make a beep sound when he turned it on. And it looks like it's gonna work. No signal. Let's wait. Oh, right there. It's working. What does it say? PS4 was not turned off properly. Okay, that's why it took some time to load. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you in the next video.